Hey YouTube, Awesome Rider here, coming at you with probably the only Power Rangers Comic-Con news, because outside of the Boom Studios panel and some signings related to that, all they really have is a really dinky booth at Hasbro. But we got confirmation about the future of the comics. You know, if you didn't follow the news, there was an announcement a while back that the comic, as we know it, like the mainline comic, would be ending with issue 122, which just came out, then followed by the Darkest Hour one-shot, which closes out the overall storyline of Darkest Hour and the comics in general. And it was a little bit confusing the way they rolled it out, because like it wasn't clear right away that they were going to continue. Like they almost made it seem like in the first announcements that this was like the end, like they were losing the license and we wouldn't be getting any comics after they finished whatever. And then it was clarified like, no, we are going to have more stuff in the future. We're going to announce it at Comic-Con. And then of course since then we've gotten a couple other new announcements of some one-shots and stuff like that. But I guess the main stuff was being saved for this, in which first we just simply learned that the license would continue beyond 2024, which is this year. So they obviously renewed their contract for however many years, 1, 2, 3, who knows. But then we got an announcement of what the relaunch will be. It's going to be coming out in November 2024, and it's called Power Rangers Prime, and it appears to be another MMPR relaunch. In fact, the description says, wait for it, MMPR relaunch promises a spectacular return for Power Rangers fans with a new series and story arcs. That's all I have. As of this recording, that's all I could find. Unlike previous years where I was able to go on like boards or even Twitter and see like information and breakdowns, I didn't even see anything on Twitter. Like I did see someone link the article eventually, and then I got the information from that, but I didn't see any other further breakdowns. I'm having this go up, I think, Sunday morning, so maybe there'll be more news about it, if it's significant or whatever, if there's more clarification, or when there's more clarification, because obviously we'll probably get more details later. I'll do an update video later this week, but as of this recording, that seems to be all that was given. So right now we don't know whether that means, obviously it's a refresh, just like we got sort of when they split Mighty Morphin and Power Rangers into Mighty Morphin and Power Rangers. It's kind of like a new era type thing. They do that all the time in comics to sort of give people a new jumping on point, because it can get overwhelming and confusing. And it is a refresh, but we don't know whether they've been hyping up Darkest Hour as the end of the mainline comics. So, but still we don't know whether that means that this would still be following it to some degree, like it could be in the same continuity technically, or if it's a total reimagining. Meaning, like, there's a chance that this Darkest Hour event, which is very, you know, Crisis on Infinite Earth, Secret Wars coded in terms of like a big kind of multiversal cataclysmic event that leads to some sort of universal reset so that they can change the status quo and yet again give a nice jumping on point. I always find that funny and entertaining that comics' simplest way of making a like kind of clean issue 1 jumping on point for new fans is to have the most confusing fuster-cluck crossover possible, and I love it. But anyway, so there is a possibility that Darkest Hour could lead into this, and it might just be more of a fresh start, meaning like it could still technically be in the same continuity, but it wouldn't be like, you know, post-Shattered Grid, even though they did like the universe reset, they then directly started to tie back into the consequences of it. So I could see this being more of a full reset in terms of, yeah, it's still in the same continuity, but we're gonna kind of just move forward like it's a reboot, and maybe one day we'll touch on stuff like that. Kind of like they did with the DC animated movies when they had the DCEU ones that was like more like New 52 stories, sort of. And then they did their own cataclysmic event where they reset and did the Tomorrowverse, and then like eventually they called back to it, how it's connected. So I could see them doing that, because it's comics after all, where it would be a clean slate for a long time, kind of a nice new clean jumping on point. But then far in the future, if they ever wanted to do some timey-wimey shenanigans, they could be like, but once this universe was created by the timey-wimey Darkest Hour stuff. Or it could simply just be a reboot, like a reset, a totally new universe, and that's the way they're going with that. But it basically is continuing with MMPR, already prepared for the whining about it, but I knew this was going to happen. I thought there was maybe a slim chance for something different, but they have to go with what sells because that's what the casual audience is familiar with and obviously has been buying because they've been successful enough to continue all this time off of that. So honestly, as long as the stories are good, I'm happy. The 2 covers we've seen as of this recording, one is just a normal MMPR red one. The other has this really cool looking different MMPR red one, which is kind of neat. I don't think that would be the new main suits, but I wouldn't mind if they did a reboot, if they got kind of slightly completely reimagined suits. I think that would be kind of neat. Honestly, even though the Boom continuity is my favorite, I personally consider it my main universe, if they did do a reset reboot, I wouldn't necessarily be upset. I suppose it could theoretically be boring if you're going back to season 1 Rita times, but we don't know what kind of story they're doing yet. But I also would be really curious to see like what the new refresh would be like, because they obviously know what they've already done, and they can't go over exactly what they did before. So I'd be fine either way. I think the best thing to do would maybe, if Darkest Hour ends in kind of that reset where, technically speaking, issue 1 does feel like a reboot, but it also is a continuation from a certain point of view, in the sense that you can eventually draw that line later, but in the meantime it's a nice jumping on point. And I think that's kind of a smart thing to do. You know, the Power Rangers comics do confuse a lot of people, I've seen, and it can be confusing, but it's like nowhere near as intimidating as getting into Marvel and DC comics sometimes. But it's nice to have that refresh, especially for like a brand that people might not want to spend that much effort catching up on. So I think it's smart to keep the Boom license going. I think that it's been pretty successful. Like, I've been pretty impressed by how like long they've kept it up and some of the other stuff we've gotten. I do hope that like as this continues, you know, we've seen that as we've had the mainline comic, there has just been other miniseries and stuff. I'm curious how long Ranger Academy is going to go, but I wouldn't mind seeing them do a sequel to The Return. They set up for it. I really like that a lot. I would love to see that. And they're doing that one-shot anthology thing, which is kind of like an annual in a way, but it's telling different stories written by the actors. I would love for that to become a thing. Honestly, I'd love for them to bring back annuals. We only ever got 2, I believe, and they were really cool. And that's a cool way to do an annual, like just one shot, where you can bounce around the timeline and do other series that aren't MMPR. And I would love to see that. I doubt this would happen, but it would be neat if the anthology series we're getting would spin off into its own thing, kind of maybe releasing sort of similar to Ranger Academy, where it's not as regular, it seems, or maybe one that just doesn't release as often, but you get an anthology of stories, maybe sometimes written by the actors, maybe sometimes not, sometimes MMPR, sometimes not. I think that would be cool. Regardless, I am happy the show is continuing. The show is definitely not continuing. I am happy that the series is continuing. You know, Power Rangers is in a rough spot right now franchise-wise, but it's also in a very common type of area where we've seen lots of other franchises in, where you're just kind of in this quiet limbo where you have stuff like comics and some merchandise keeping you going a little bit, but not much else going on. It seems a little bit whiplashy for the PR community, because, I mean, it's not a good place to be in, but I think it seems whiplashy just because we're so used to it being so consistent in a way that a lot of other franchises aren't. Like, even franchises that are more consistent and aren't necessarily dormant will have longer gaps in time where nothing's going on, simply because production will take longer on whatever the next movie or TV show is, whereas we're used to something which is kind of the exception and not the rule, which is yearly seasons. So it is nice that we will be able to continue to have this to keep it alive in some form or another. But anyways, guys, let me know what you think in the comments as always. Until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell to get notifications for my videos. Dawson Ryder, signing out.